The church bells tolled in the distance, each heavy note sinking deeper into my chest as I stood by my husband's grave. Daniel had been my companion for 24 years, a man of discipline, quiet charm, and at least in my mind, unwavering loyalty. He wasn't a man of grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but he had always been steady, like the oak tree in our backyard that withstood every storm. Now he was gone. The condolences came in whispers, hands pressed gently against mine, hollow words meant to comfort, though none of them could soothe the aching hollowness spreading through me. Grief had a strange taste, bitter, metallic, lingering at the back of the throat. I felt it even as I returned home that evening, the house too silent, too still without his presence. For the first few days, I drowned in memories. His laughter over Sunday breakfasts, his stern yet kind face when he insisted I rest instead of overworking, even his annoying habit of reading the newspaper aloud when I preferred silence. Every corner of the house was haunted by him. Yet something gnawed at me, a small splinter of unease I couldn't name. It came from the farm. Daniel had owned it long before we married. A patch of land 2 towns away, inherited from his father. But through the years, he had forbidden me from ever stepping foot there. Whenever I asked, his expression would harden, the warmth leaving his eyes. "Leave the farm alone, Eleanor," he'd say. "It's just an old burden. Nothing worth your time." I remember once, in the early years of our marriage, suggesting we could grow grapes there, maybe even open a small winery. His reaction was so sharp it stunned me. He slammed his coffee cup down, spilling it across the table. I said, "No, Ellie. Don't ever bring it up again." I never did. Out of love, out of fear of hurting him, out of respect. But now, as I sorted through his papers, that farm kept clawing back into my thoughts. On the 3rd day after his funeral, I discovered something. It was late. The house dark except for the amber glow of the lamp on Daniel's desk. I had opened his leather briefcase, the one he always carried to work, and inside a sealed envelope lay waiting for me. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably his. Sharp, precise strokes spelling my name, Eleanor. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside there was no heartfelt goodbye, no final declaration of love. Instead, it contained a single sheet of instructions, written in his stern matter-of-fact tone: do not visit the farm, sell it immediately if possible, do not ask questions, and do not go there under any circumstance. I stared at the letter for what felt like hours, my grief momentarily eclipsed by confusion and anger. Even in death, he was forbidding me. Even from the grave, he was trying to control what I could or couldn't do. But why? Why had this land held such a grip on him? Enough to become his dying request. As I placed the letter down, a small brass key slipped from the envelope, clinking softly against the desk. I picked it up, turning it in my palm. Its teeth were worn, its bow etched with a small number 7. My heart pounded. A key to what? Over the next week, I tried to distract myself with the endless tasks of widowhood, meeting lawyers, sorting insurance papers, responding to relatives who offered pity. But every night, my eyes drifted back to that key, to the words of his letter, to the memory of his harsh voice whenever the farm was mentioned. It was as though the farm was pulling me, whispering through the walls of my empty house. Finally, on the 10th day after his funeral, I could no longer resist. I stood before the mirror, wearing my thick wool coat, the brass key tucked safely in my purse. For the first time since Daniel's death, my reflection didn't look entirely broken. My grief was still there, yes, but now something else burned behind my eyes, something sharper: determination. As I locked the front door and walked to my car, I whispered softly, almost to myself, "I need to know, Daniel. I need to know what you hid from me." The drive was long, the landscape shifting from bustling town streets to lonely, winding roads surrounded by trees. The sky was gray, heavy with winter clouds, and the silence inside the car seemed louder than ever. When I finally saw the wooden sign at the edge of the property, my breath caught. Whitmore Farm. The name carved into the sign was weathered, the paint peeling, yet the letters stood firm. The land stretched beyond, acres of fields, barns and fences. But it wasn't the neglected ruin I had pictured. No. Despite Daniel's constant dismissal, the farm looked alive. The fields were tilled. Smoke curled from a distant chimney. Someone was here. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my pulse quickening. Every instinct told me to turn back, to obey his last words. But I pressed on, the gravel crunching beneath the tires as I drove toward the secrets my husband had taken to his grave. Little did I know, my life was about to split in two, the before and the after. The crunch of gravel beneath my tires grew louder as I drove deeper into the farm. My hands, slick with sweat despite the chill outside, gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Do not visit the farm. But the more I looked at the place, the more I realized he hadn't just wanted to keep me away, he'd wanted to keep the truth buried. The driveway split into two paths, one leading toward a barn with its red paint still vibrant, the other toward a small stone house where smoke curled lazily from the chimney. For a property Daniel had always described a useless burden, it looked alarmingly well kept. I parked near the barn, my heart hammering. As I stepped out, the crisp air hit me, carrying the faint scent of hay, damp soil, and wood smoke. A strange déjà vu settled over me, as if I'd stepped into a memory I didn't own. The barn door creaked open. A man emerged, broad-shouldered, with rough hands and wary eyes. His clothes were work-worn, and a streak of dirt marked his cheek. When he saw me, he froze. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice carried shock, as though my presence were both impossible and dangerous. I stiffened. You know who I am. He removed his cap nervously, his eyes darting toward the stone house. Everyone here knows who you are, ma'am. We just never expected to see you. My stomach tightened. Everyone here. Where is the foreman? Who's running this farm? I demanded. He hesitated, then murmured, Best if you ask Miss Clara. Clara. The name felt foreign on my tongue, sharp and intrusive. Before I could question further, the door to the stone house opened. A woman stepped out, wrapped in a shawl, her hair pinned neatly, her face pale yet undeniably beautiful. She wasn't young, but she carried herself with a quiet grace. When her eyes landed on me, she stopped mid-step, her expression flickering from surprise to something harder, something defensive. Eleanor Whitmore, she said, her voice low but steady. I suppose it was only a matter of time before you came. I blinked, stunned. You know me. Of course. She descended the steps slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. Daniel spoke of you often. He said you were kind, devoted, loyal. Her lips pressed into a thin line. But he also said you would never set foot here, that you respected his wishes. The words pierced me like a blade. He had spoken of me, yes, but in what context? As a distant figure, a wife kept safely away from this secret world he had built. My voice cracked. What is this place? Who are you to my husband? For a moment, Clara's mask slipped. Grief flashed in her eyes, quickly swallowed by steel. Come inside. You deserve to see. Inside the stone house, warmth enveloped me. A fire blazed in the hearth, the scent of baked bread lingering in the air. Yet I barely registered it, because on the mantel sat photographs. Dozens of them. Daniel's face smiled back at me in every frame, but not with me. In one photo he stood with Clara, his arm draped across her shoulders, his smile wide in a way I hadn't seen in years. In another, he held a young boy, maybe 8 or 9, who bore a striking resemblance to him. The same sharp jaw, the same stormy gray eyes. My breath caught. No. I staggered back, my vision blurring. Clara's voice was quiet, almost apologetic. This is Samuel, your husband's son. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. Betrayal thundered through me, so fierce it made my grief feel like a pale shadow. Daniel, my Daniel, had lived a second life here, with another woman, another child, another family. I turned to Clara, my words trembling with fury. How long? She met my gaze without flinching. Since before you married him. The air left my lungs. Before me, the pieces began to click into place. The secrecy, the forbidding tone, the refusal to let me near the farm. All those years of his late nights, his unexplained trips, his evasive answers, they all led here. Clara moved closer, her eyes softening. I never meant for you to find out like this. Daniel always said he wanted to protect you from the truth. He didn't want to hurt you. A bitter laugh escaped me. Protect me. By lying to me for 24 years. Tears blurred my vision as rage consumed me. My heart ached not only for the betrayal but for the cruel irony. I had mourned a man who never truly belonged to me. From the corner of my eye I saw the boy, Samuel, peek from the hallway, his eyes wide with curiosity. He looked at me not with fear, but with innocent confusion. He didn't know. He couldn't possibly understand the storm brewing between the adults in the room. I swallowed hard, forcing back a sob. My husband's secret wasn't just an affair. It was a life, a child, a legacy built on lies. And in that moment, as my tears burned hot down my cheeks, a new thought pierced through the sorrow, sharp, cold, and merciless. If Daniel had spent his life weaving lies, then I would spend mine unraveling them. But I wouldn't break. No, I would rise. And I would make sure that everything he had built in secrecy would belong, in the end, to me. The firelight flickered against the stone walls, casting long, restless shadows across the room. I sat in silence, my hands trembling against my lap, my gaze locked on the photographs lined neatly across the mantel. Each one was a dagger, each smile an insult carved into my memory. Daniel had looked happy here, happier than I could remember him being with me in the last decade. The boy had retreated back to his room, leaving only Clara and me in the suffocating quiet. The crackling of the fire seemed to mock me, its warmth unable to reach the cold storm brewing in my chest. At last, I found my voice, though it quivered with rage. How long were you planning to hide this from me? Until I died never knowing. The Clara exhaled slowly, folding her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes, an unsettling mix of guilt and defiance, met mine. Daniel never wanted you to suffer this truth. He said you were fragile. Fragile. My voice cracked like thunder. I was his wife, his partner. And yet I was nothing but a shadow compared to this. I gestured to the photographs, the life I had been excluded from, the life carefully cultivated behind my back. Clara's jaw tightened. I didn't ask for this, he chose me. He chose Samuel. You must understand. I understand perfectly. I cut her off. My words sharp as glass. I was his cover, his respectability. The woman he paraded before the world while you were his secret sanctuary. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them down. No more weakness. Not here. Not now. Clara's composure wavered. He loved us both in his way. The words landed like poison. Loved us both. As if Daniel's betrayal could be softened by sentiment. My hands curled into fists in my lap. No, Clara. Love doesn't divide itself like property. Love doesn't deceive. What he did wasn't love. It was cowardice. She flinched, but did not deny it. Instead, her silence was an admission, a confession without words. I rose, my legs unsteady but driven by a fury that refused to let me collapse. I moved to the photographs, my fingers grazing the frames, tracing Daniel's smiling face. Every picture was proof that the life I had lived was a half-life, an incomplete truth built on his lies. How did he support you? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. Clara hesitated. The farm, it was his way of caring for us. He poured his money. Samuel's education, our home, the workers, everything came from him. My chest tightened. Our money, my sacrifices. All those years when Daniel insisted we couldn't afford certain luxuries, when he dismissed my dreams of travel, when he scolded me for small indulgences. It hadn't been about saving or prudence. It had been about funding this other life. The realization was like acid burning through my veins. I turned back to Clara, my voice steadier now, though laced with ice. Do you know what it feels like to grieve a man, to bury him, to sob until your chest feels hollow, only to learn that your grief is built on lies? Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes glistened, but I felt no pity. Not anymore. He lied to you too. I continued, my voice hardening. Do you think you were his true love, his chosen one? No, Clara. You were just another secret. Another shame he couldn't face openly. If he had truly loved you, he would have given you his name, his vows. Instead, he gave you a farm hidden in the shadows. Her composure cracked then. She lowered her gaze, her hands tightening on the shawl as tears streaked her cheeks. I told him we couldn't keep living like this. I begged him to choose. But he always said it was impossible. That he couldn't hurt you. A bitter laugh escaped me. Couldn't hurt me. Every day of his lies was a wound. For a long moment, the only sound was the fire and Clara's quiet sobs. Inside me, grief still twisted like a knife, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Resolve. The weight of betrayal was crushing, yes, but it also sharpened me. I would not let Daniel's deception destroy me. No, I would rise above it, and in rising, I would take back every ounce of dignity, every shred of power he had stolen from me. I straightened my shoulders. The farm is legally mine now. Every field, every barn, every brick of this house. His will left everything in my name. Clara's head snapped up, her face paling. What? No, he promised. He said this place would always be ours. I held her gaze, my tone unyielding. He lied to you too. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Clara looked as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. For the first time since arriving, I felt the power shift, tilting toward me. In that moment, the seeds of revenge sprouted fully in my heart. I would not rage blindly. I would not destroy myself with bitterness. Instead, I would do what Daniel never expected. I would take everything he tried to hide and make it mine. The farm, the fortune, the legacy. I would rebuild it, not as a monument to his betrayal, but as a testament to my strength. His name would fade, his lies forgotten, but I, Eleanor Whitmore, would endure. And as for Clara and her son, that decision, I realized with chilling clarity, would soon be mine to make. The days after my discovery passed in a haze of sleepless nights and relentless thoughts. Grief had not vanished, but it had transformed, reshaped into something sharper, like molten steel hammered into a blade. Betrayal was my fire, and revenge was the shape it gave me. Clara avoided me after our confrontation. She kept to her side of the farm, clinging to the illusion of permanence Daniel had promised her. Samuel, innocent and wide-eyed, played in the yard, unaware of the storm looming above his small world. Each time I saw him, a pang of pity stabbed me. But I forced myself to remember his existence was not his fault, but his presence was a reminder of the lies that had stolen decades of my life. I sought answers in Daniel's papers, his accounts, his secret ledgers hidden in the farmhouse desk drawers. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. He had diverted thousands, our money, into this farm, into Clara's life, while I pinched pennies, believing we were struggling. He had built wealth here, cultivated prosperity, but deliberately kept me in ignorance, as if I were unworthy of truth. No longer. The law was on my side. The farm, the house, the accounts, all had been left in my name. Perhaps Daniel had thought it would appease me in death, a final peace offering. Or perhaps he had miscalculated, never imagining I would step foot here. Either way, the power was mine now. One morning, I summoned the workers to the barn. They came hesitantly, their faces weathered, their eyes darting nervously between me and the house where Clara lingered. They had lived under her quiet authority, but now they looked at me, uncertain. I stood tall, my voice unwavering. My husband is gone. This farm, every acre, every building is legally mine. From this day forward, you work under my direction. Anyone unwilling to accept that is free to leave. A murmur rippled through them, but no one moved. Loyalty, I realized, had been to Daniel's money, not to Clara. And now that money flowed through me. Clara burst in then, her face pale with fury. "You can't do this," she hissed. "This farm is ours." Daniel promised. Daniel promised many things he could not keep. I cut her off coldly. "This place belongs to me, and you live here only by my grace." Her lips trembled, her fists clenched. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. But then her shoulders sagged, defeat washing over her. She knew the truth. Without Daniel, without his lies to shield her, she was powerless. I did not cast her out immediately. That would have been too merciful, too simple. Instead, I let her stay in the stone house, watching as I dismantled the world she thought was hers. I changed everything. The workers answered to me now. I hired new overseers, invested in modern equipment, expanded the farm's reach into new markets. Within months, the Whitmore farm, once Daniel's hidden sanctuary, was transformed into a thriving enterprise under my name. The townsfolk began to whisper. They spoke of me, Eleanor Whitmore, the widow who had taken a neglected farm and turned it into success. They spoke of my resilience, my strength. My husband's name faded into a mere footnote, while mine was carried with respect and admiration. Clara, meanwhile, withered. She watched as her influence evaporated, as Samuel grew up under the shadow of my authority. I paid for his schooling, clothed him, fed him. But I never let Clara forget that it was my choice, my generosity that allowed them to remain. Each time she looked at me, I saw the humiliation burning in her eyes. It was not cruelty that kept her here, it was justice. She was forced to live with the reminder that everything Daniel had promised her belonged, in the end, to the wife he had betrayed. But my revenge was not only in taking control, it was in rising beyond the role of victim. I wrote articles about agricultural innovation, gave speeches at community events, and eventually, a business magazine approached me. They wanted to feature my story, how a grieving widow turned betrayal into triumph. The day my face appeared on the cover, I stood before the mirror, the glossy magazine in my hands. My reflection stared back at me, older, wiser, stronger than I had ever been. The headline ready, "From Betrayal to Power, Eleanor Whitmore's Farm Legacy." I smiled, not out of joy, but out of victory. Daniel had sought to bury me in lies. He had tried to confine me to the shadows, to keep me blind while he lived a double life. But in the end, his greatest secret became my greatest triumph. He was gone, his promises dust, his legacy nothing more than the ruins of his deceit. But I remained, and I had built something greater from the ashes of his betrayal. For the first time since his death, I felt at peace, not because I forgave him, but because I no longer needed to. My revenge was not in destroying his memory, but in eclipsing it entirely.